Whether you realize it or not, each of us has a framework through which we make decisions about our data, our privacy, and the way we access the internet. There are some people who are very passive about their privacy, and they're the ones who are emailing me saying things like, "Privacy? I have nothing to hide." On the other side, you have people who lean more towards conspiratorial paranoia, and they're the ones who are leaving comments on my videos like, "Wait, you use Apple products and claim to care about privacy? You are dead to me." So yeah, I lean somewhere in the middle. I do care about my privacy, obviously, but instead of seeing every big data and social media company as a cancer that I need to get rid of, I prefer to make intentional, calculated decisions about my privacy. How do I do that? Well, today I'm going to share with you my privacy framework, which can be distilled down to 5 commandments that I try my best to follow. I don't always, but I try my best. This framework is always evolving, so I'm open to discussion in the comments of this video for those of you who think that I'm missing something or perhaps just outright disagree with me, and that's great. I welcome that. My goal is to get you to move beyond binary thinking. In other words, beyond the simple, this is private, this isn't private mentality. I want you to begin to understand how you personally balance security and privacy versus comfort and convenience. And by doing this, I promise that you'll approach how you get online and give out your information in a whole new way. Okay, let's get started with number 1. Commandment number 1, I need to know who I'm trusting. It's very misleading to think that you can actually trust no one. When you get online, you're trusting a particular internet service provider. When you use a specific operating system like Windows, Mac OS, and yes, even Linux, you're trusting the companies and programmers behind those systems. Same with password managers, VPNs, identity monitoring services. All of these companies that claim to enhance our privacy and security require you to trust them. Now hear me clearly, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I trust 1Password to secure my passwords. I trust Proton Mail to secure my sensitive email. The point of this commandment isn't to eliminate trust because I think that's impossible. The point here is to know who I'm trusting and to be intentional about where I'm placing that trust. This is why in all of the reviews of security software I have on this channel, I do specific research on the company behind the software and who's running that company. It's important for me to know who I'm trusting because I want them to be accountable to that trust. So now that I've recognized that I have to trust somebody, that leads me to commandment number 2. Commandment number 2, find ways to limit or reduce that trust as much as possible. Now before we unpack this, let me make a couple confessions here. I use Gmail. I do. I have an iPhone, a Facebook account, and I make purchases through Amazon. If I wanted to be invisible, I would get rid of all of these. In fact, Chris Luna in his book, How to Be Invisible, lays out 4 levels of privacy. And the 4th level, which he says is basically like duplicating the federal witness protection program, is not only extremely difficult, it's also illegal. In other words, there is such thing as too far when it comes to your privacy. Again, I want to find a place where I'm comfortable balancing privacy and convenience. I've done a whole series on how to limit the data that I give to companies like Amazon, Facebook, and Google, which I encourage you to watch, but the takeaway here is that I've decided I'm not going to delete my accounts. I'm not going to go that far. I'm simply going to find ways to limit what data I give them. And commandment number 3 is probably one of the best ways to do that. Commandment number 3, divide control of my data and privacy. What do I mean? Well, let's look at it as a simple equation. If I use a Chromebook laptop, accessing the internet through the Chrome browser, finding answers using Google search, asking Chrome to store all of my passwords, and then log into my Gmail account, that's an equation that equals too much reliance on one company, Google. Instead, I'd like to divide that up. So I'll use my MacBook computer to access the internet through the Firefox browser. I'll search using either DuckDuckGo or StartPage and rely on 1Password to hold all my passwords. Then I'll log into my email that's split between both Gmail and Proton Mail. This equation is one that I'm much more comfortable with. And in my subjective opinion, this equation equals better privacy. Are there ways to get even more privacy? Sure, but this is where I'm comfortable. For the most part, I try to use specific applications that were designed for a specific use. In other words, I don't want to use my browser to save my passwords. It wasn't designed to do that. It was designed to get me on the internet. I don't use a VPN to scan the dark web for my data. That's not what a VPN is for. I want to divide my data among applications that specialize in that specific aspect of my privacy. Make sense? Okay, before we jump into commandment number 4, if you're watching this and find yourself agreeing with my thought process here, why not take a moment and click that subscribe button down here? This is a framework I use to present practical means of privacy and security in our everyday lives, and I got lots of great video content coming up here on all things secured that you're going to really benefit from. Commandment number 4, control my own data as much as possible. This can be done in a number of different ways, but I'm going to highlight 3 of them: client-side encryption, local storage, and data segregation. Don't worry if you don't understand those. Let's start with client-side encryption. A great example of this can be found in the last video that I just did about cloud storage. Yes, I use Google Drive, Dropbox, and others to store my data on their servers in the cloud, but I encrypt the data first using a program like Boxcryptor, or you guys, a lot of you left comments talking about Cryptomator, which is another great open source free version. That's client-side encryption. I want to have some control of that encryption so that even if a company claims to use zero-knowledge encryption, meaning none of their employees can peek in on my account and see what I have in my files, I'm still limiting my trust by encrypting my own data and giving it to them. Another way I could control my data is through local storage. This could mean using a physical hard drive, like this one I have here, instead of the cloud to store all of my files, if you like, or using a password manager that keeps the password vault on your device and doesn't sync it to the cloud. Better yet, you could use a device like the YubiKey or this only key that I've shown you before to keep all of your passwords on a physical device that you carry with you wherever you go. Again, we're trading privacy for convenience here, and that's a decision that you're going to have to make on your own. Finally, you can control your data through what I call data segregation. For me, this means separating out my most sensitive data and treating it differently than my standard data. My most sensitive data doesn't get stored in the cloud. My most sensitive data is never transmitted via Gmail. My most sensitive data is never given to just anybody who requires or asks for it. I mean, some companies ask for my address when all they really need is my zip code to verify the credit card. Some companies ask for my phone number or, strangely, my ID number, my social security number, when they don't really need it. This is my data, and I want to control it as much as possible. Commandment number 5, backup, backup, backup. This all goes back to trust. I don't even trust this local hard drive not to fail on me, and so I want to have all of my data backed up on at least 2 different drives in 2 different places, if at all possible. Sometimes that's really hard. The biggest offender I see here is 2-factor authentication. I get emails and comments from so many of you who've set up something like Google Authenticator or Authy to secure their online accounts, which is a great thing, and then they somehow lose access to their phones. Either they lost their phone or it got reset or whatever. The point is they no longer have access to these 2FA codes, and consequently they lose access to all of their online accounts, or at least the ones that are the most important. If they haven't backed up the codes, which means either keeping those backup codes that you're given when you first set up 2FA or taking a screenshot of that QR code and keeping it in an encrypted file, they're in a heap of trouble. Even when I'm using 2FA keys, which is my preferred method, I have this YubiKey that I carry around with me on my keychain. I purchased a second set, which is what I use, and after setting both of them up, I keep that second backup key in a safe elsewhere in case I somehow lose my keys and I don't have access to this first set of 2FA keys. Security and privacy are great things to work toward, but as much as possible, create that safety net with good backups. Well, that's my framework for how I treat data and privacy, but I'd love to hear from you. Do you agree or disagree? Do you think I need to add something? I try to read every comment, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say.